My name is Valeria. I'm 42 years old, and what I'm about to tell you completely changed my life and the way I see relationships. Because when the person you swore to love humiliates you in front of strangers just to feel superior, it's time to show them that appearances can be deceiving, and that sometimes the insurance agent he despises can be much more than he ever imagined. It all began 6 months ago, at a business dinner that seemed like any other. My husband Robert, 45 years old, had organized a meeting with his partners at the most exclusive restaurant in the city. I had arrived straight from my office, still in my navy blue suit that I wear for client meetings, my hair pulled back in a bun that already showed the signs of a long day's work. Robert had insisted. So insistent that I attend. It's important that my wife is present, he had told me that morning while adjusting his Italian tie in front of the bedroom mirror. The partners want to get to know you better, Valeria. Besides, I need you to make a good impression. I remember perfectly how I smiled at the mirror while applying the coral lipstick he said looked good on me. Of course, my love. I'll be there, I had replied, not knowing that night would mark the beginning of the end of everything I thought I knew about my 15-year marriage. But let me back up a bit so you can better understand who I am and how I got to this point. My name is Valeria Mendoza, although after getting married I adopted my husband's last name and became Valeria Castellanos. I grew up in a humble neighborhood on the outskirts of the city, where my mother worked as a seamstress and my father was a mechanic. From a young age I learned the value of hard work and the importance of education. My mother always told me, "Honey, study, prepare yourself, because knowledge is the only thing no one can take away from you." And wow, was she right. I studied business administration at the public university, working as a waitress at night to pay my expenses. It was during that time that I met Robert. He came from a wealthy family, studied at the most prestigious private university in the city, but he used to come to the cafe where I worked because, according to him, we made the best coffee in the whole area. At first, our social differences didn't seem to matter. Robert said he loved my determination, my strength, my ability to get ahead without anyone's help. "You're different from all the girls I know," he would tell me while we had coffee after my shift. "You're real, authentic. You don't pretend to be something you're not." How ironic, right? Because years later, the very thing he claimed to love would become a source of embarrassment for him. We got married 3 years after we met. The wedding was modest, in my parents' backyard, with barely 50 guests. Robert's family hardly attended. His mother, Mrs. Carmen, a society woman who always wore designer clothes and spoke with that condescending tone some people have when they think they're superior, looked me up and down when Robert introduced me as his fiancée. "Ah, you're the... What did you say your job was, dear?" she had asked me at our first family dinner, with that fake smile that didn't reach her gray eyes. "I'm an insurance agent, ma'am," I had replied with pride. "I work for one of the most important insurance companies in the country." "Oh, how interesting," she had said, taking a sip of her wine as if she needed to wash a bad taste out of her mouth. "Robert, darling, don't you think you could find something better for your future wife? Maybe in your father's company?" "Mom, Valeria is excellent at what she does," Robert had defended me back then. "She's one of the best salespeople in her company." How things change, right? The same man who defended me against his mother would be the one to publicly humiliate me years later. During the first years of marriage, everything seemed to go well. Robert moved up quickly at the consulting firm where he worked, while I continued to build my career in the insurance world. We had 2 beautiful children, James, who is now 12, and Sarah, who is 10. We bought a house in a good neighborhood, not as luxurious as where Robert's parents lived, but respectable enough for their standards. However, as time went on, I started to notice small changes in Robert. Subtle comments about my work, comparisons with his colleagues' wives, suggestions that maybe I should consider staying home with the children. "It's not that your job isn't important," he'd say while checking his phone during dinner, "but let's be honest, Valeria. Selling insurance isn't exactly a prestigious career. Look at Claudia, my partner Martin's wife. She quit her job when they got married and now she focuses on charity work. Now that gives status." "I'm passionate about my job, Robert," I would always reply. "Besides, I help families protect their assets to have financial security. It's important." "If you say so," he would sigh, returning to his phone. What Robert didn't know was that I wasn't just a simple insurance salesperson. For years, I had been saving every extra commission, every bonus, investing intelligently with the help of a mentor I met at a finance seminar. Mr. Albert Ramsey, a 70-year-old man who had built an empire from scratch, saw something in me that even I didn't see at the time. Valeria, he had told me after one of my presentations at the seminar, you have a vision for business. Don't just stay selling insurance. Invest, build, create something of your own. And I did. Secretly, because I knew Robert wouldn't understand, I started investing in real estate, in tech startups, in investment funds. I created a holding company under my mother's name to keep it separate from the family finances. Robert never asked about my personal finances. He assumed that everything I earned went into the joint family fund, and I let him believe it. But let's go back to that fateful night at the restaurant. I arrived on time, as always. The maitre d' recognized me immediately and guided me to the private table where Robert was already with 3 men I didn't know. My husband stood up when he saw me arrive, but I noticed something different in his expression. It wasn't the warm smile he used to give me. It was more of a tense grimace, as if my presence made him uncomfortable. "Gentlemen, I present my wife Valeria," Robert said, and then, as if he needed to justify something, he added quickly, "She came straight from work, hence the outfit." I felt the heat rise to my cheeks. My suit was professional, flawless. Maybe it wasn't a designer cocktail dress, but it was appropriate and elegant. "A pleasure," I said, extending my hand to each of the partners. "I'm Valeria Castellanos." "Delighted," replied the first, a man in his 50s with completely gray hair. "I'm Martin Dominguez, senior partner of the firm." Alex Ruiz, the second one, introduced himself. Younger, maybe Robert's age. "And I'm Carlos Herrera," said the third, a burly man with a Rolex watch that glittered under the restaurant lights. I sat down next to Robert, who immediately turned his attention back to his partners, as if I were invisible. The conversation revolved around mergers, acquisitions, market strategies. Topics that, to their surprise if they knew the truth, I understood perfectly. "The problem with the TechCorp acquisition," Martin was saying while cutting his steak, "is that their valuation is inflated. They're asking for $30 million for a company that's worth $20 million at most. But their client portfolio is solid," Alex intervened. "And they have those government contracts that could be very lucrative." I couldn't help it. My experience in the investment world pushed me to speak. "Excuse me, but have you considered that TechCorp might be hiding debt? Their cash flow from the last quarter shows some inconsistencies that..." The silence that followed was deafening. Robert looked at me as if I had committed the worst possible crime. The partners exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Valeria sells insurance," Robert said quickly, with a nervous laugh that didn't hide his irritation. "She doesn't know what she's talking about. Honey, why don't you tell us about, I don't know, did you sell a life insurance policy today?" The condescension in his voice was like a slap in the face, but what came next was even worse. "She's adorable when she tries to join in on real business conversations," Robert continued, addressing his partners as if I weren't present. "You know how women are. They watch one documentary on YouTube and think they understand corporate finance." Martin let out an uncomfortable laugh. Alex averted his gaze. Only Carlos maintained a neutral expression, observing me with something that looked like curiosity. "Actually," I said, trying to maintain my composure even though I felt my hands trembling under the table, "I have a degree in business administration." Yes, from the public university," Robert interrupted me, making a gesture with his hand as if shooing away a fly. "It's not the same as the Harvard MBA that Martin has, right? Honey, seriously, better leave the complex topics to us. You focus on your insurance policies. By the way, gentlemen, did I tell you Valeria won the Employee of the Month award? She sold 5 car insurance policies." His tone was so patronizing that several diners from nearby tables turned to look at us. "Robert," I said in a low voice, "please." "What?" "I'm just showing off my hard-working wife," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Although, between us, he lowered his voice conspiratorially towards his partners, but loud enough for me to hear. "Sometimes I wonder why she keeps working. It's not like we need her modest contribution. But you have to give them their little projects to make them feel fulfilled. What would you have done in my place?" I felt as if the world stopped. 15 years of marriage, 2 children, a life built together, and my husband was reducing me to a joke in front of strangers. I felt the tears threatening to spill, but I refused to give him that satisfaction. "If you'll excuse me," I said, standing up with all the dignity I could muster, "I just remembered I have an important call with a client in Tokyo. The time difference, you know." "A client in Tokyo?" Robert scoffed. "What, someone needs to insure their Toyota?" The partner's laughter was weak, uncomfortable, but Robert was on a roll. "Don't go, honey. Stay. I promise we won't talk about boring business stuff anymore. We can talk about something more on your level. How about you tell us about the new soap opera you're watching?" "I don't watch soap operas," I replied coldly. "Ah, right, I forgot. Valeria thinks she's very intellectual because she reads those self-help books," he told his partners. "The other day I found her reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Can you believe it? As if she's going to become a millionaire selling insurance." That was the moment. The exact moment when something inside me broke and, at the same time, strengthened. I looked at my husband, the man with whom I had shared my life, who knew my dreams, my struggles, my triumphs, and I saw a stranger, a cruel, small stranger who needed to humiliate others to feel big. "You're right, Robert," I said with a calm that surprised even me. "Maybe I should stay in my lane. After all, what can a simple insurance agent know about real business?" I bent down to pick up my purse, and as I did, I accidentally brushed Robert's wine glass, spilling it all over his documents. "Valeria, how clumsy are you?" he exclaimed, jumping from his chair. "These are the contracts for tomorrow's presentation." "Oh, I'm so sorry," I said with false concern. "You know how us simple women are, clumsy and uncoordinated. I better go before I cause any more damage." I walked out of the restaurant with my head held high, but as soon as I got to my car, the tears I had been holding back finally came out. I cried not only for the humiliation, but for the loss. The loss of the man I thought my husband was, the loss of the illusion of a happy marriage. I drove aimlessly for half an hour, until I found myself parked in front of the building where Mr. Albert, my mentor, worked. Even though it was late, I knew he would be there. The man practically lived in his office. "Valeria," he greeted me when he saw me enter his office, but his expression changed when he saw my face. "What happened, kid?" I told him everything. Every hurtful word, every mocking laugh, every moment of humiliation. "Mr. Albert listened in silence, his dark eyes shining with something that looked like contained fury. "Do you know which company is trying to acquire Tech Corp?" he asked me when I finished my story. "No, they didn't mention the name," I replied, wiping away the last of my tears. Mr. Albert stood up and walked to his window, looking at the city lights. "It's Quantum Consulting, the company where your husband works." "How do you know?" He turned to me with a smile I hadn't seen before. "Because I am one of the silent investors in Tech Corp. And let me tell you something else interesting. Quantum Consulting is on the verge of bankruptcy. They've been hiding millions in losses for 2 years. The Tech Corp acquisition is their last desperate attempt to save themselves." My heart sped up. "Are you sure? Completely?" "In fact, I've been considering making an offer to buy Quantum Consulting. It would be a hostile takeover, of course. The company is worth something only for its client portfolio, but it would need a complete restructuring, firing most of the current management." He looked at me meaningfully, and I suddenly understood what he was proposing. "Mr. Albert, I can't. That's the company where Robert works. The same Robert who just publicly humiliated you? The one who mocked your intelligence and your career?" His voice was soft, but firm. "Valeria, you've spent years building your investment portfolio. You have the capital. You have the knowledge. The only thing you're missing is the will to use it. But buying an entire company, not alone. I'll put up 60%, you 40%, but you would be the CEO. I'm too old for these games, but you have the energy, the vision, and now, the motivation." I spent the whole night awake thinking about Mr. Albert's proposal. Was it crazy? Was it revenge? Was it justice? Maybe it was all of that and more. It was the opportunity to show who Valeria Mendoza really was. The next morning, Robert acted as if nothing had happened. Not an apology, not an explanation. He just got up, showered, ate breakfast, and left for work with a casual "See you tonight" as a goodbye. The kids noticed the tension. "Are you okay, Mom?" Sarah asked me during breakfast. "Yes, my love. I'm just thinking about a big project at work." "Are you going to sell a lot of insurance?" James asked innocently. Something like that, I replied, ruffling his hair. After dropping the kids off at school, I went straight to Mr. Albert's office. We spent the whole day reviewing the numbers, Quantum Consulting's financial statements, acquisition strategies. It was fascinating to see how a company that looked so solid on the outside was rotten on the inside. Hidden debts, inflated contracts, unfulfilled promises to clients. The main problem, Mr. Albert explained as we reviewed the documents, is the management. They've been stealing from the company for years, million-dollar bonuses while the rank-and-file employees don't get raises. Personal expenses disguised as corporate expenses. Your husband, for example, has spent over $200,000 on business dinners this year alone. $200,000? And that's just what's documented. The real audit will probably reveal much more. The irony was delicious and bitter at the same time. The man who mocked my modest contribution had literally been stealing from his company. Let's do it, I said finally. Let's buy Quantum Consulting. Mr. Albert smiled. I knew you'd say that. I already have the lawyers preparing the offer. The following weeks were an emotional roller coaster. On one hand, I maintained the facade at home, acting like the normal wife Robert expected. On the other, I was orchestrating the purchase of his company. I had to be very careful. Any hint could ruin everything. Robert, meanwhile, was increasingly stressed. The TechCorp acquisition wasn't going well, apparently. I don't understand what happened, he muttered one night while reviewing documents in his study. We had the deal closed, and suddenly they backed out. What happened? I asked, feigning casual interest while making tea. Someone made them a better offer. Someone with a lot of money. He slammed his fist on the desk. If we don't get this acquisition, the company is finished. I'm sure you'll find a solution, I said, placing the teacup in front of him. He looked at me with disdain. What would you know? Stick to your insurance policies and let me work. If only he knew, I thought as I left the study, that the person who made that better offer was standing right in front of him. Have you ever had an experience where someone completely underestimated you? Tell me in the comments. The feeling of knowing something others don't, of having a power others don't suspect, is intoxicating and terrifying at the same time. 3 weeks later, the bomb exploded. Robert came home, pale as a ghost. What happened? I asked, although I already knew the answer. Someone bought the company, he said, collapsing onto the sofa. A hostile takeover. They bought all the available shares and convinced the main investors to sell. The new owner is coming tomorrow to introduce themselves. Oh, Robert, I'm so sorry, I said, sitting next to him. Do you know who it is? No, I just know it's some investment fund. VM. Holdings or something. VM Holdings. Valeria Mendoza Holdings. Sometimes life has a twisted sense of humor. I'm sure everything will be fine, I consoled him, rubbing his back. You're very talented. The new owner would be foolish not to recognize your value. He looked at me with something resembling gratitude. Thanks, Val. I know I've been difficult lately. It's just the pressure from work. I understand, I said, although inside I was thinking, no, Robert, you don't understand. But you will soon. I couldn't sleep that night. The next day, everything would change. I got up early, put on my best suit. Not the usual navy blue one, but a black designer suit I had bought especially for the occasion. I did my makeup carefully, styled my hair in soft waves that fell over my shoulders. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the insurance agent Robert despised. I saw the CEO I had always been. You look different, Robert commented at breakfast. Do you have something special today? An important presentation, I replied, which was technically true. Ah, are you going to try to sell insurance to some company? His tone was still condescending, even when he tried to be nice. Something like that. Robert left first, nervous about meeting the new owner. I waited an hour, long enough for everyone to be gathered in the boardroom, and then I headed to the Quantum Consulting building. The glass and steel building rose imposingly in the financial district. I had passed by it many times, always looking at it from the outside. Now, it was mine. The receptionist looked at me confused when I walked in. Excuse me, do you have an appointment? I don't need an appointment, I replied calmly. I'm the new owner. The poor girl almost choked on her coffee. I'm sorry? Please tell Mr. Dominguez that the CEO of VM Holdings is here. While I waited, I observed the lobby. Italian marble, designer furniture, a ridiculously ostentatious fountain, all paid for with debt and embezzlement. There would be many changes. Martin Dominguez appeared in less than 2 minutes, practically running. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, I don't have your name." "Valeria," I said simply. "Valeria Mendoza." I watched him process the information, recognition slowly dawning on his face. "Valeria? Robert's wife? The one and only, although I prefer Mrs. Mendoza in a professional context." "Is everyone gathered in the boardroom?" "Yes, but this must be a mistake." "The only mistake," I said, walking past him towards the elevators, "was underestimating the insurance agent." "Are you coming?" The elevator ride was silent. I could see Martin sending messages frantically, probably alerting everyone. Perfect, let them prepare. When the elevator doors opened on the executive floor, there was a small welcoming committee. Alex, Carlos, several other executives I didn't know, and of course, Robert. The expression on my husband's face when he saw me get out of the elevator was priceless. Confusion, disbelief, and then, slowly, horror. "Valeria? What are you doing here?" he stammered. "I've come to officially introduce myself as the new CEO of Quantum Consulting," I replied, walking towards the boardroom. "Shall we go in? We have a lot to discuss." "Is this a joke?" Robert said, following me. "This has to be a joke." I stopped and turned to him. "A joke? Like when you mocked me in front of your partners? Like when you said my job wasn't a real business?" "No, Robert, this isn't a joke. This is real business." I entered the boardroom and took a seat at the head of the table, the place usually occupied by the CEO. The executives filed in slowly, as if walking to their execution. "Good morning, everyone," I began, opening my briefcase. "As you already know, VM Holdings has acquired Quantum Consulting. I am Valeria Mendoza, the CEO of VM Holdings and, as of today, your new boss." "This can't be legal," Robert interrupted. "You don't have the money to buy a company." "You mean the money from my modest contributions?" I asked with a smile. "Turns out I've been quite good at investing those contributions. But don't worry, I didn't use a single cent of the family money. I built all of this myself, with my job selling insurance and my investments." But Robert was pale. "Now, let's talk about the future of this company," I continued, ignoring his stammering. "I've reviewed the financial statements and frankly, they're a disaster. Embezzlement, inflated expenses, fraudulent contracts. The list is long." I took out a folder and slid it across the table. "Here is the evidence of all the irregularities I've found. Mr. Dominguez, $250,000 in personal expenses disguised as corporate expenses. Mr. Ruiz, $100,000 in family trips billed as business trips. And Robert." I paused, looking directly at my husband. $300,000 in various fraudulent expenses, including that dinner where you humiliated me. Which, what? You billed as crucial business development for $5,000. "Valeria, please." Robert was sweating. "We can talk about this at home. There's nothing to talk about. You are all fired, effective immediately." Chaos erupted. Shouts, threats of lawsuits, pleas. I expected it all. "You can leave on your own," I said calmly, "or I can hand all this evidence over to the authorities. Embezzlement is a serious crime. What do you prefer?" One by one, they filed out of the room. Martin muttered something about contacting his lawyer. Alex didn't even look at me. Only Carlos stopped at the door. "For what it's worth," he said, "I knew there was more to you that night at the restaurant. Robert was an idiot." "Thank you," I replied. Finally, it was just Robert and me. "How could you do this to me?" he asked, his voice breaking. "I'm your husband, the father of your children, and how could you publicly humiliate me, mock my career, my education, my dreams?" I stood up and walked to the window. "You know what's saddest, Robert? I loved you, I would have done anything for you, but you never really saw me. To you, I was always less than you, the poor girl you were kind enough to marry." "That's not true." "No? Then why did you never ask about my investments? Why did you assume all my money went to the family fund? Why did you mock me when I mentioned TechCorp's inconsistencies? Which, by the way, I was right about." Robert sank into a chair. "What's going to happen now? With us? With the kids?" The kids will be fine. They have a successful mother who loves them and can provide for them. As for us, I took another document from my briefcase. These are the divorce papers. They're already prepared. I'm giving you two options. Sign, and we get divorced civilly, sharing custody of the children. Or we fight in court, where I will have to present all the evidence of your embezzlement. Are you blackmailing me? No. I'm giving you a dignified way out, which is more than you gave me. Robert took the papers with trembling hands. Is all this because of that dinner? You destroyed my life over one stupid comment? No, Robert. You destroyed your life with years of fraud and corruption. I just brought what was already rotten to light. And it wasn't just one comment. It was the straw that broke the camel's back after years of contempt and condescension. What am I going to do? I have no job. I have no money. Maybe you can sell insurance, I said, and I couldn't help the irony in my voice. I hear it's an honest job, although not very prestigious according to some. If this story reminds you of something you've lived through, write to me in the comments. You are not alone in this. Sometimes the people we love most are the ones who underestimate us the most, but it's never too late to show our true worth. The following months were intense. Robert signed the divorce papers and moved in with his parents. The news of his firing and the reasons behind it spread like wildfire in his family's social circle. His haughty mother, Mrs. Carmen, came to see me once, begging me to give her son another chance. I always knew you were a social climber, she told me with venom when I refused her request. A gold digger who seduced my son. Ma'am, I replied calmly, your son had no fortune when I met him. I built my own fortune while your son was stealing from his company. If anyone here is a climber, it's not me. The transformation of quantum consulting was my most ambitious project. I hired new staff, implemented transparency policies, renegotiated contracts with clients who had been deceived. In 6 months, the company was not only profitable, but it had regained its reputation. Mr. Albert was proud. I knew you had the makings of a leader, he told me during a celebration dinner. You just needed the chance to prove it. And the motivation, I added, raising my wine glass. The children adapted better than I expected. James and Sarah saw their father on weekends, and although it was difficult at first, we found a rhythm. Robert, to my surprise, seemed to learn something from the experience. He got a job at a small company, in a much more modest position, and according to the kids, he had stopped being so arrogant. One afternoon, 6 months after the divorce, Robert came to pick up the kids and asked to speak with me. I just wanted to tell you, he began, clearly uncomfortable, that you were right. About everything. I was an idiot, arrogant, and a bad husband. Robert. No, let me finish. I've had a lot of time to think. I thought I was superior to you for all the wrong reasons. Your humble background, your job, your education. But the truth is, you were always superior to me. In integrity, in intelligence, in determination. I was the fraud, not you. Thank you for saying that, I replied, and I meant it. Do you think you could ever forgive me? I already forgave you, Robert. Not for you, but for me. Resentment is a heavy burden, but forgiving doesn't mean forgetting or going back. He nodded, understanding. Take care of the kids, and congratulations on your success. You deserve it. As I watched him walk away with James and Sarah, I reflected on everything that had happened. The humiliation in that restaurant had been the catalyst for the biggest transformation of my life. Not just professional, but personal. I had discovered my true worth, not in the eyes of others, but in my own. My investment company continued to grow. I bought other struggling companies, restructured them, made them profitable. I became a mentor to other women who, like me, had been underestimated by their partners, their bosses, society. I created a foundation to give scholarships to girls from humble neighborhoods who wanted to study business administration. One day, while giving a lecture on female entrepreneurship, a young woman approached me after my presentation. Mrs. Mendoza, she said shyly, my husband says I'm silly for wanting to start my own business. He says I should just be content with my secretarial job. What advice would you give me? I looked at her and saw my younger self. I'm going to give you the same advice my mentor gave me a long time ago. Invest in yourself, build in silence, and when you're ready, show your worth. And if your husband can't see your potential, maybe the problem isn't you. The girl smiled and left with a new determination in her eyes. That night, in my new house, a beautiful property I bought with my own money, without anyone's help, I sat on my terrace with a glass of wine, looking at the city lights. James and Sarah were doing their homework in the dining room, their laughter filling the house with life. My phone rang. It was a message from Carlos Herrera, the only one of Robert's ex-partners who had shown any decency. "Valeria, I heard your lecture today. It was inspiring. I was wondering if you'd be interested in a joint investment project." This time, "I promise there will be no condescending comments about insurance salespeople." I smiled. Life has funny ways of coming full circle. The same man who had witnessed my humiliation now saw me as an equal. "No, as someone to admire and do business with," I replied. "Send me the proposal. I'll review it with my team. My team, my decisions, my company, my life." You know what the most ironic part of all this is? I still sell insurance. Yes, that's right. I kept my license, and occasionally I help families protect their assets. Not because I need it financially, but because it reminds me of where I come from and what I'm capable of achieving. Every policy I sell is a reminder that no job is small when done with dignity and excellence. Robert was right about one thing. Selling insurance wouldn't make me a millionaire, but the discipline, perseverance, and skills I developed selling insurance did. The difference is that I never despised my job. Every sale was a stepping stone to something bigger. A week ago, I ran into Martin Dominguez at a charity event. He approached nervously, probably expecting me to ignore him. "Valeria," he said, "I wanted to apologize. For that night, for laughing, for not defending you when Robert—" "It's okay, Martin. We all make choices. Some of us choose to build, others choose to destroy. You chose to be complicit in bullying. I chose to prove my worth. We both live with the consequences of our decisions. I've heard your company is doing very well." "It is. In fact, we're expanding internationally." That client in Tokyo I mentioned that night wasn't a lie. He was the CEO of a Japanese tech company I had been in investment talks with. "We're partners now." Martin swallowed hard. "Robert was a fool to lose you. Robert never really had me. He had a tiny version of me that he had created in his mind. The submissive wife, the mediocre salesperson, the grateful poor girl. When that illusion shattered, he didn't know what to do with the reality." That conversation made me think of all the women who are in relationships where they are belittled, where their dreams are ridiculed, where their achievements are minimized. If you are reading this and you identify, I want you to know something. Your worth is not determined by the opinion of your partner, your boss, or your family. Your worth is determined by you. Do you think I overreacted or did the right thing? The truth is, I'm not looking for validation. I did what I had to do to regain my dignity and prove my worth. But I'd love to know what you think. Have you experienced something similar? How did you handle it? The children have been my biggest concern throughout this whole process. I made sure they had therapy to process the divorce, and today I can say they are doing well. Sarah, my little one who is now 11, told me something the other day that touched my heart. "Mom, when I grow up, I want to be like you. Strong, smart, and not let anyone tell me I can't do something because I'm a woman." "My love," I replied, hugging her, "you are already strong and smart, and nobody, listen to me, nobody has the right to tell you that you can't achieve something because you're a woman. If anyone tries, remember Mom's story and Dad's company." James, on his part, has learned a different but equally valuable lesson. "Mom," he told me recently, "when I have a girlfriend, I'm going to treat her with respect, not like Dad treated you." It broke my heart to hear that, but it also filled me with pride. My children are learning the right lessons from this experience. The company that was once Quantum Consulting is now called Phoenix Enterprises. Like the phoenix, it was reborn from its ashes. We employ over 500 people, and I have a strict policy. Respect is non-negotiable. It doesn't matter your position, your salary, your education. Everyone deserves respect. A month ago, I hired a brilliant young woman named Emily. She's 25, comes from a humble neighborhood like me, and graduated from the public university with honors. During her interview, she reminded me so much of myself I almost cried. "Why do you want to work here?" I asked her. "Because you are my inspiration, Mrs. Mendoza. I read your story, how you went from selling insurance to being CEO. My boyfriend makes fun of me for wanting more than being a bank teller, but I know I can achieve more. Your boyfriend makes fun of you? I asked, feeling a familiar pang of recognition. He says I have delusions of grandeur, that girls like us don't get far. Emily, I said, looking her directly in the eyes, girls like us get exactly as far as we decide to go. And if your boyfriend can't see your potential, maybe you need to reevaluate that relationship. But that's your decision. What I can tell you is that here, in this company, your potential will be recognized and cultivated. I hired her on the spot. Today, she is one of my most promising executives. From which country are you watching this story? I love knowing that these experiences transcend borders, because the belittling of working women is, unfortunately, universal. But so is our capacity to overcome it. Reflecting on everything I've been through, I realize that Robert did me a favor without knowing it. His humiliation was the push I needed to stop hiding, to show my true potential. For years, I had kept my investments secret, my intelligence hidden, my ambition dormant, all so as not to upset his fragile ego. How many of us do that? How many of us make ourselves small so our partners can feel big? How many of us hide our achievements so as not to overshadow those who claim to love us? True love doesn't ask you to shrink. True love celebrates your growth, applauds your victories, pushes you to be your best version. If your partner feels threatened by your success, the problem isn't your success. Mr. Albert passed away 3 months ago. He left me the rest of his shares in Phoenix Enterprises and a letter that I cherish like a treasure. Dear Valeria, when I met you, I saw a brilliant woman hiding her light under the shadow of a mediocre man. I'm glad I lived long enough to see that light shine in all its splendor. Never settle. Never apologize for your success. And never, ever let anyone tell you that selling insurance isn't a dignified job. With admiration and affection, Albert. I cried for hours after reading that letter. Mr. Albert had been more than a mentor. He had been the father I always wanted, the one who believed in me unconditionally. At his funeral, Robert showed up. He stayed in the back, respectful. After the ceremony, he approached. Mr. Ramsey meant a lot to you. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you, I replied, genuinely touched by his gesture. Valeria, I've been thinking. The kids have told me about your foundation, about the scholarships you give. I was wondering if I could help in any way. Not with money, obviously, but maybe. Giving talks about what not to do in business, about business ethics from the perspective of someone who lost it. I looked at him, surprised. This was not the arrogant Robert I knew. That would be a valuable lesson, I admitted. I'll talk to my team. As he walked away, I thought about how people can change when they hit rock bottom. Robert had lost everything. His job, his status, his family, his pride, and in that process, he seemed to have found some humility. But let's not get confused. This isn't a redemption story for Robert. It's a story about a woman who refused to be defined by the limitations others placed on her. It's about all of us who have been underestimated, belittled, humiliated, and still, we rise. Today, as I write this from my office on the top floor of the Phoenix building, with a panoramic view of the city, I think about that woman crying in her car after being humiliated in a restaurant. If I could talk to her, I would tell her, this pain you feel now is the fuel for your transformation. This humiliation is the last push you need to fly. My story is not unique. There are thousands of Valerias out there, selling insurance, working in offices, attending shops, all with dreams bigger than the jobs their circumstances have given them. To all of them I say, don't give up. Invest in yourselves. Learn, grow, build in silence if you must, but build. And when someone mocks your modest job, when your partner humiliates you for your small contribution, when society wants to keep you in your place, remember that the only place you belong is the one you decide to conquer. The sweetest revenge is not destroying the one who humiliated you. It's building something so big that their opinion becomes irrelevant. It's standing in your own power and realizing you never needed their validation. Robert thought he was humiliating me that night. In reality, he was setting me free. He freed me from the need for his approval, from the burden of maintaining his ego, from the prison of being less so he could feel like more. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who also needs to hear it. In the comments, tell me, have you lived through something similar? From which country are you watching? I read all the comments because every story you share reminds me why it's so important to raise our voices. And remember, Grandma's Diary family, sometimes the universe conspires in mysterious ways. That humiliation that hurts today may be the catalyst for your greatest transformation. That person who belittles you may be, without knowing it, pushing you towards your destiny of greatness. I'm not just an insurance agent who bought her ex-husband's company. I'm a woman who refused to accept the limitations others tried to impose on her. I am living proof that when you believe in yourself, when you invest in your potential, when you refuse to shrink so others can feel big, there is no limit to what you can achieve. My name is Valeria Mendoza. I sell insurance, and I am the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. And that, dear Grandma's Diary family, is not a contradiction. It's my truth. It's my power. It's my final revenge.